I'd never been the kind of person who trusted strangers online, but that fall I needed the money. Rent had gone up again, my car needed a new transmission, and Christmas was creeping up fast. I didn't want to ask my parents for help. They already thought I was barely keeping it together. So I started listing old stuff on a local buy and sell site called Trade Loop. One night, while scrolling through my closet for things I hadn't touched in years, I found my old Canon AE1 film camera. It was a relic from my college photography phase. I hadn't shot film in forever, but I remembered how heavy it felt, how it made me feel like I actually saw things. Maybe someone else could give it new life. I cleaned it up, took a few pictures of it on my kitchen table and posted it for $200. Within an hour, I got a message. Harold. Hi, Lena. I've been looking for this exact model. Yours looks in great shape. Would you be open to meeting halfway? I'm about 40 minutes out of town. His profile picture showed a middle-aged guy with thinning hair and glasses, smiling like a friendly teacher. The account was new, no reviews, but polite. Me. Sure. Where did you have in mind? Harold. There's an old rest stop off Route 12 next to a diner. Safe place, middle of nowhere, no traffic. Say tomorrow, 5:30. That last part, middle of nowhere, should have made me hesitate, but it didn't. At the time, it sounded perfect. Neutral, quiet, safe. The next evening, fog rolled in early. I loaded the camera into its worn leather case, grabbed a coffee for the road, and headed out. Route 12 wound through farmland and silent fields. I passed one truck, maybe two. My GPS pinged as I neared the old diner, its neon sign flickering. Eat through the mist. The parking lot was empty. I waited 10 minutes, checked my phone, no messages. Then, from behind the diner, someone stepped out. He was tall, maybe late 40s, and walked with the stiff posture of someone trying to appear calm. His smile looked too wide for his face. Lena, he called, voice smooth. Sorry I'm late. He carried a camera, not just any camera. The same Canon AE1. I thought we were trading, he said, tilting his head. My stomach tightened. Trading? No, I'm selling mine. He blinked, then laughed softly, the sound echoing in the fog. Oh, maybe I misread your message. He stepped closer. You look just like the last one. The last one? He ignored the question. Mind if I take a quick look? Something about the way he said, look, made me back away. Actually, I think I'll just head out. He moved faster than I expected, stepping in front of my car door. Hold on now, don't be rude. And that's when I saw it, a small Polaroid photo taped to the back of his camera. It was me, standing in my apartment parking lot, taken from across the street. Where did you get that? I whispered. He tilted his head again. You really don't remember? I shoved him, hard enough to make him stumble, jumped into my car and tore out of the lot. My hands were shaking so violently I nearly missed the turn back to the highway. When I got home, I locked every door and checked my messages. His profile was gone. The next morning, I saw a new listing on Trade Loop. My own camera. Same model, same scratches, up for sale. The reflection in the lens showed a faint, familiar shape. It was me. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound from the hallway made my heart jump. By dawn, I'd convinced myself I'd imagined it. Maybe it wasn't really me in that Polaroid. Maybe I was overreacting. But when I looked at the new listing again, the photo of the camera was too precise. I recognized the chipped paint on the shutter button, the faint dent near the film advance lever. Mine. The seller's username was VintageView77. When I clicked the profile, it showed no information. No location, no contact link, just the single listing. I tried messaging them, but the app wouldn't let me. The send message button was grayed out, so I reported it. Trade Loop's automated system thanked me for my feedback and said a representative would review the report within 48 hours. 48 hours felt like a lifetime. I didn't go to work. I couldn't. Every time I looked out my window, I thought I saw movement in the parking lot. Someone leaning against the fence just out of focus. That afternoon, I went downstairs to check my mailbox. On top of the junk mail sat an envelope. My name was typed on the front. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a Polaroid photo. It showed me driving away from the diner the night before. I dropped it, my hands cold and useless. I ran upstairs, locked the door, and called the police. The officer who came was young, sympathetic, and clearly skeptical. "Could be some creep following you, sure," he said. "But unless he threatened you directly or entered your property, there's not much we can do. Any chance you know him personally?" "No," I said. He said I looked like the last one. I don't know what that means. He frowned, jotting something down. "You still have the online messages?" "Some of them. His profile's gone now." He shrugged. "Save everything, screenshot it all. Maybe he'll contact you again." "Maybe? Or he'll move on," he said. That didn't comfort me. I changed my locks that night. I shut my blinds tight. But even then, I felt watched. Like my reflection in the darkened window was someone else's. 2 nights later, I dreamed I was back at the diner. The fog was thicker, swallowing the road. The man's face was hidden, but his voice came from every direction. "You shouldn't have run," it whispered. I woke up drenched in sweat. My phone buzzed, a message notification from an unknown number. We didn't finish our trade. No name, no context. I blocked the number immediately, but then another message arrived. Same phrasing, different number. We didn't finish our trade. Over and over from random area codes. I turned my phone off, threw it across the room, and sat on my bed shaking. At some point, I realized there was only one way to make it stop. I had to go back. The next morning, I packed my phone charger, a flashlight, and a small knife. Ridiculous, I know. And drove back toward Route 12. The fog had lifted, but the diner looked worse in daylight. Peeling paint, windows boarded from the inside. The rest stop was deserted. I parked, heart hammering. There was a faint sound behind the diner. I forced myself to walk around. Empty beer cans, cigarette butts, and in the dirt, footprints. But not just one set. 2. One larger, heavier, pressed deep into the mud. The other smaller, maybe female, but older. And at the edge of the tracks, something glinted. A Polaroid camera. The camera was old, scratched, and heavier than I remembered. When I lifted it, something slid loose from the film compartment. A photo. It was faint and overexposed, but I could make out the outline of a woman standing beside a car that looked just like mine. Her head was turned, hair blowing across her face. I couldn't tell if it was me, but I felt that same coldness in my stomach. I shoved the picture into my pocket and drove straight home. When I got there, I locked the door and pulled the blinds again. I was shaking so badly that I spilled coffee on the counter trying to steady my hands. I told myself to call someone, my sister, a friend. But who would believe this? "Hey, I met a stranger online who took my photo and maybe followed me home." I barely believed it myself. That night I decided to develop the photo. I still had some old chemicals and trays from when I'd used to do my own darkroom work in college. The routine calmed me a little. The smell of fixer, the quiet drip of water, the red light cutting through the darkness. When the image began to appear under the developer, I leaned in. The figure in the photo was me, but not from the diner. It was my apartment building, and I was walking toward my car, exactly how I'd been that morning before meeting Harold. Someone had taken it from the trees across the parking lot, and behind me, barely visible, was the same man. I knocked the tray off the counter, spilling chemicals everywhere. I grabbed my phone, but before I could dial, a soft knock came from the hallway outside my apartment door. 3 taps, then silence. I froze, every instinct screaming at me to stay quiet. Another knock, slower this time. I dialed 911 and whispered what was happening. The operator told me to stay on the line. The knock stopped. By the time the police arrived, the hallway was empty. The only thing on the floor was a Polaroid photo, slid halfway under my door. It showed the back of my head, standing in my kitchen. The photo had been taken from inside my apartment. I stayed with my sister for the next week. The cops took the photos, the camera, even my laptop to check for spyware or remote access. They found nothing. The officer who'd been assigned to my case called daily, mostly to tell me there were no new leads. But one morning, his tone changed. "We traced an old license plate from the diner security cam," he said. "Registered to a Harold Jenkins. He died in 2014. I nearly dropped the phone. "What?" He sighed. "Yeah, been dead over 10 years. His ID must have been used by someone else. We're still digging." After that, I stopped getting calls from him too. His number went straight to voicemail. By December, I'd convinced myself to move. I found a cheaper apartment closer to work and promised myself a fresh start. But on my first night in the new place, I unpacked my boxes and found something that made my blood run cold. At the bottom of a box labeled kitchen stuff, wrapped in an old towel, was my camera. The same Canon AE1. I hadn't seen it since the police took it. I stared at it for what felt like hours before finally picking it up. The lens was cracked, but something glimmered faintly in the glass. I held it to the light and froze. In the reflection of the lens, just behind me, was a man's smile. I spun around. No one there. When I looked back, the reflection was gone. I haven't listed anything online since. I deleted every account, changed my number, and stopped answering unknown calls. But sometimes when I walk through a parking lot or glance at a store window, I swear I see a shape behind me. Someone holding a camera, just waiting for me to notice. And every so often, a new ad appears on Trade Loop. For sale, Canon AE1, excellent condition. Buyer must pick up in person. The photo always looks familiar, because it's always taken from just outside my window. Trust is earned, not assumed. We live in a world where our faces, locations, and routines can be found in seconds, but safety still depends on boundaries. Never trade caution for convenience. Not every friendly smile behind a screen means good intentions, and sometimes the scariest reflections are the ones waiting to see if you'll look back. Long before that night, I'd always thought of Willow Lane as the safest place I'd ever lived. A sleepy street tucked behind the old train tracks, lined with faded mailboxes and porch lights that flickered yellow in the fog. It was the kind of neighborhood where people waved at each other even when they didn't know your name. And the loudest thing you'd hear after dark was the rumble of a passing truck on the highway a mile away. I moved there 2 years ago after my breakup, renting a small 2-bedroom with my friend and coworker Jenna. She was the talkative one, always leaving candles burning and music playing low, even when she was cleaning. The house never felt empty when she was around. That weekend, though, she was gone, back home in Michigan visiting her parents. I remember her saying as she wheeled her suitcase down the steps, "Don't go all paranoid on me, Mara. It's just one weekend. You'll have peace and quiet for once." "Yeah," I told her, laughing. "Just me and the ghosts." She smirked. "You joke, but this house does creak weird at night." She wasn't wrong. Old wood, old pipes, the kind of house that settled with sighs. I didn't mind it. After working 10-hour shifts at the clinic, silence was a luxury. That Friday night, the temperature dropped fast. By the time I finished dinner and curled up on the couch with my laptop, a thin frost had already started forming on the windows. I could see my own breath when I walked near the back door. The power lines hummed in the wind, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once and went quiet. Around 10, the first knock came. 3 sharp taps, deliberate. I froze, hands hovering above my keyboard. It wasn't the sound of a tree branch or the settling house. It was the rhythm of a knuckle on wood. I muted the TV and waited, every nerve in my body awake. When I finally got up and checked the peephole, the porch was empty. Just frost and fog glowing under the streetlight. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a prank, maybe wind, and went back to the couch. But 10 minutes later, when I'd just started typing again, I heard the second knock, from the back door. I can't explain why, but something inside me went cold. The sound was softer this time, slower, like whoever it was waiting for me to come closer. I grabbed the kitchen knife and the long one Jenna always said made her feel safer, and walked slowly toward the back of the house. I could hear it then, faint, uneven breathing, right on the other side of the door. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I nearly dropped the knife. A text from Jenna. "Hey, did you leave the side door unlocked?" My blood went cold. I hadn't touched the side door since she left. I stared at her message, then looked up and heard the crunch of footsteps circling the house. Slow, dragging, careful. I whispered into my phone as I dialed 911. Someone's outside my house. The operator told me to stay on the line, but I could barely speak. The doorknob to the back door turned once, then stopped. Then again. By the time the police arrived, the yard was empty, just a trail of fresh footprints pressed into the frost. Each one circled the house, and on every door and window, a single handprint, flat against the glass. The police searched the yard with flashlights, their beams cutting through the mist. 2 local officers, both looked barely out of their 20s, tried to keep their voices calm for my sake, but I could tell they were uneasy. "Could have been kids," one said. "We get prank stuff like this sometimes." "Kids don't leave adult-sized prints," I muttered. They asked if I wanted to stay somewhere else for the night. I said no. Maybe I should have said yes. After they left, I locked every window twice and pushed the couch in front of the back door. Still, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house made me sit up straight. I kept the kitchen light on until dawn. The next morning, I found something the police hadn't noticed. A small and scrape mark under the side window, like a knife or key had been dragged along the frame. When I texted Jenna, she freaked out. "Mara, you have to call someone. Don't stay there alone tonight." But I had work, and I wasn't about to let fear run my life. I told her I'd be fine. That evening, I came home to find the frost thicker than before, coating the grass like powdered sugar. I checked every door again, every lock, every curtain. Still, the house felt off. Around 9:30, I heard movement outside, faint scraping steps. I turned off all the lights and crouched by the window. At first, I saw nothing, just fog. Then, a shape. Someone standing near the edge of the yard, just past the mailbox. Still, watching. They didn't move when I turned my phone light on. Didn't flinch. Then, gone. I didn't sleep again that night. By Sunday morning, I was ready to leave. Bags packed, keys in hand. Then I noticed something. Every single hand printed from the first night was gone. Not faded, gone. As if someone had wiped them clean. That detail scared me more than the handprints themselves. That night I stayed up late on purpose, waiting. Midnight came. Silence. 1 a.m. A sound at the back again. Not knocking this time. Scraping. Like a fingernail or metal dragging along glass. I called 911 again, whispering into the phone. But when the dispatcher asked for my address, I froze, because I could hear something on the line. Breathing. Not mine. The dispatcher kept asking if I was still there. I hung up. A moment later, the porch light flickered and went out. And then the front door handle moved. I didn't go near it this time. I crawled to the hallway closet, shut the door, and clutched the knife to my chest. I could hear movement again, slow steps along the porch, then across the living room floor. Inside, my throat tightened so hard I could barely breathe. Every step on the old floorboards echoed through the house, the sound of boots, heavy ones. He walked past the closet once, paused, then turned back. I could see his shadow through the slats of the door, tall, wearing some kind of hood. I held my breath as his hand touched the closet knob. It turned halfway, then stopped. Somewhere outside, a police siren wailed. The shadow turned, moving fast toward the back of the house. I heard the window shatter, the rush of cold air, then nothing. When officers arrived minutes later, I was still hiding in that closet, shaking. They searched the whole house, nothing. But the back window was open, footprints leading away through the frost, and halfway down the block, they simply ended. No trail, no sign of where he'd gone. I moved out within a week. The landlord didn't even argue. He said he'd had other complaints from tenants before. It's been 6 months now. I still live in the same town, but I don't drive down Willow Lane anymore. Some nights when it gets cold, I still dream about the sound of those footsteps circling the house. Jenna won't talk about it. The police closed the case. But sometimes, I check the local news. Last week, a report came out. Another woman a few streets over found fresh handprints on her windows after a night of frost. They said it must have been condensation. Maybe it was. Or maybe he's still out there, waiting for another quiet house, another empty weekend, another person who thinks the knocks are just the wind. Never ignore your instincts. Kindness, logic, and reason are all powerful. But when something deep inside you whispers, something isn't right, you must listen. Because sometimes danger doesn't roar. It waits quietly outside, knocking just loud enough for you to hear. I never used to believe in ghosts. Not the kind that float through walls or whisper in empty rooms, but the kind that live in you, made of guilt, memory, and the things you never said. It was November when I came back to Astoria, Oregon, after nearly 10 years away. The air there has a way of cutting straight through you, wet and cold from the mouth of the Columbia River. I'd worked on docks all my life, first as a deckhand, then hauling freight. When my mother died, I told myself I'd settle her affairs, stay a few weeks, and then head south again. But Oregon has this way of keeping you, holding you in its damp hands until you forget you ever planned to leave. The rusted lantern sat near Pier 9, a low-slung bar with a flickering sign and a single jukebox that hadn't played since the 90s. I didn't plan to go in that night. My shift had run long, and I just wanted a drink before heading to my motel. But when I saw the lights still burning past midnight, I thought, why not? Inside smelled of wet wood, whiskey, and the faint tang of salt. The bartender, a woman in her 50s with dark hair pulled tight, looked up as I entered. "Haven't seen you in years," she said, smiling. I frowned. "You must have me confused with someone else. First time here." She tilted her head but didn't argue, just poured me a whiskey. I sat near the middle of the bar. There was one other man, a shape really, down at the far end, navy coat pulled tight, face hidden under the shadow of his brim. He was humming something low, something that might have been a sea shanty, the kind old-timers used to sing on the trawlers. When I looked up again, he was staring right at me. He tapped a rhythm on the counter, 5 slow knocks. Tap, 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 tap. "You made it home, didn't you?" he said. His voice was rough, like a rope dragged through sand. Not everyone did. Before I could respond, the lights flickered. The hum of the old beer cooler stopped for a moment, and in that heartbeat of darkness, the man vanished. His stool sat empty, his drink sweating on the counter. The bartender looked up from polishing a glass. "You okay, hun?" I turned to her. "That guy who was sitting here, where'd he go?" She blinked. "What guy?" I stared at the empty stool. "Tall, navy coat, was just here." She shook her head slowly. "Sweetheart, you're my only customer tonight." Outside, the wind howled down from the river. I drained the whiskey and left without another word. The next morning I woke to sirens. The sound carried through the motel's thin walls, bouncing off the mist-heavy air. When I stepped outside, a police cruiser tore past toward the docks, red lights smearing across the fog. Curiosity got the better of me. I walked down to Pier 9. The tide was high, slapping against the pilings like impatient hands. A small crowd had gathered, dock workers, a few locals, all quiet. I saw the sheriff's men hauling something out of the water. It was a body, bloated, pale, tangled in seaweed. Even from a distance, I recognized the navy coat. "Fisherman," someone murmured beside me. "Went missing 2 nights ago. Poor bastard. 2 nights ago." But the man I'd seen was alive, talking, breathing, tapping that strange rhythm on the bar. When the sheriff turned the body over, I saw his face. The same one I'd seen the night before. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. That evening, I went back to the Rusted Lantern. The same bartender was there, though she didn't greet me this time. She just gave me a wary look and poured a whiskey without asking. "You heard about the fisherman?" I said. She nodded. "Everyone has. Shame about Jack." "Jack?" "Jack Turner. Used to come in here every night till his boat went under last week." My hand froze around the glass. "His boat?" "Yeah, the Marion Rose. Found him this morning near the mouth of the river." I hesitated. "I saw him here last night." She looked at me like she was deciding whether I was joking. "That can't be. Jack's been dead near a week." I didn't answer. Outside, wind rattled the sign. The bar felt colder now, emptier. I could almost hear the 5 knocks again, faint but steady, like a heartbeat beneath the floor. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Every night I'd dream of water, black waves, rope burns on my hands, someone calling my name through the fog. The same rhythm, always. 5 knocks. I went down to the pier one night, long after dark. The tide was low, exposing the rocks beneath the docks. I brought a flashlight and a bottle of whiskey, foolish comforts. That's when I saw him again. Standing near the edge, coat dripping wet, eyes dark as tide pools. "You made it home," he said. "But not everyone did." My chest tightened. "What are you talking about?" He pointed toward the river mouth. "You were there, the night we went under." And then I remembered. A year before I left Oregon, there'd been a storm. 4 of us had gone out on a small trawler. Jack Turner, me, and 2 others. We shouldn't have gone. The storm came fast, and the waves hit harder than anything I'd ever seen. The boat capsized. I managed to cling to a buoy until morning. The others weren't so lucky. I'd buried that night so deep it was like it never happened. But Jack had been one of them. "I tried to save you," I whispered. He nodded. "Then why'd you run?" The next morning, I turned in my resignation at the docks. The foreman didn't ask why, he just nodded like he understood. People in towns like this don't pry. I went back to the Rusted Lantern one last time. The bartender slid a drink my way without a word. "You look better," she said. "Like you finally got some sleep." "Maybe I did," I said. "Or maybe I just stopped running." That night, I walked down to the river, stood on the same pier where Jack's body had been found. The water was still, silver in the moonlight. I poured the whiskey into the river and whispered, "For those who didn't make it home." The wind shifted, carrying the smell of salt and rain. Somewhere in the distance, I heard 5 slow knocks echo across the docks. I didn't turn around. Some debts can't be repaid, only acknowledged. Grief doesn't always come from losing others. It can come from losing yourself to the guilt of survival. You can't outrun what haunts you, not in towns, not in oceans, not in the quiet corners of your mind. Sometimes the only way forward is to face the ghosts, not to banish them, but to understand what they're trying to tell you. When my Aunt Margaret passed away, I didn't expect to inherit anything more than a few dusty photo albums and her cat Jasper. But a few weeks after the funeral, her lawyer called and told me she'd left me her old countryside home on Wren Hill. It wasn't much, a 2-story house with peeling paint and ivy creeping up the sides. But it had history. She'd lived there since before I was born, tending her garden, baking pies, and keeping to herself after my uncle died. I visited her a few times as a kid, but I remembered the place mostly for its stillness, the kind that made you whisper, even when you were alone. I was 32, recently laid off from my job in the city, and not exactly swimming in options. So when the idea of house-sitting for a few months came up, to keep the pipes running and the place from falling apart, I said yes. I figured I'd use the time to get my head straight, maybe start painting again. The first week was peaceful. Too peaceful. The morning smelled like pine and wet earth. At night, I'd sit by the window, watching fog drift through the trees that lined the edge of the property. The nearest town was a 15-minute drive, and the only neighbor I had was an older man named Mr. Reeves, who lived about half a mile down the gravel road. He stopped by one morning to drop off some fresh eggs. Friendly guy, quiet, maybe late 60s. "Margaret was a good woman," he said, tipping his cap. "Always kept to herself, though. You staying here long?" "Just a few months," I told him. "Figured I'd keep the place up till I figure out what's next." He nodded slowly, eyes drifting toward the house. "You'll find the nights get real long out here." I laughed it off, but that line stayed with me longer than it should have. The days blurred together after that, mowing, cleaning, walking Jasper through the overgrown garden. Then about a week in, Mr. Reeves stopped by again. "Thought you should know," he said, glancing toward the house. "Yesterday afternoon, I saw someone in your upstairs window. Looked like a woman, maybe, but your car wasn't here." I frowned. Probably just a reflection. The curtains move in the breeze. He didn't argue, just gave me a look that said he wasn't so sure. That night I left every light on in the house. For the next few days I couldn't shake the thought. Every creak, every flicker of shadow made me turn my head. I told myself it was just old house noises, wood expanding, pipes breathing, the kind of sounds you forget to notice when you've lived in a city full of noise. But on the fifth night something happened I couldn't explain away. I'd just brushed my teeth and leaned over to rinse when I caught movement in the mirror behind me. A faint, fleeting blur. Someone walking past the bathroom door. I spun around. Nothing. "Jasper!" I called out. The cat padded in from the hallway, tail twitching, looking up at me like I'd interrupted his evening routine. I laughed it off, nervously, and went to bed. But sleep didn't come easy. The walls groaned with every gust of wind, and at one point I swore I heard the sound of footsteps upstairs. I grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand and crept up the staircase. The air grew colder with each step. I checked every room, nothing out of place. No open windows, no broken locks. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The next morning, when I walked into the kitchen, 3 drawers were open. Just slightly. I hadn't touched them since the night before. I closed them, telling myself I'd left them like that. But later that day, they were open again. By the second week, the house felt heavier, like it was watching me. I started hearing noises above the ceiling, soft, shuffling sounds. I figured it was raccoons or squirrels, maybe a nest. So I called a pest control guy, but he couldn't come until the weekend. That night, the noises came back. Louder this time. Footsteps, real, measured footsteps. I turned off the TV and listened, heart pounding. They stopped. Then, 3 slow steps. I grabbed the flashlight again, went to the hallway, and stared at the ceiling hatch that led to the attic. The pull string swayed faintly, though the air was still. "Hello?" I said. No answer. I climbed up halfway, shining the light through the gap. Dust swirled in the beam. Cobwebs, old boxes, nothing else. Then something small rolled toward me. A flashlight. It hit the floor near my foot. I scrambled down, slammed the hatch shut, and didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, I'd had enough. I called Mr. Reeves, told him what I'd heard. He showed up within the hour, shotgun slung over his shoulder. "Probably a drifter," he said. "Happens sometimes. Empty houses attract the wrong kind." We went up together, flashlight beams cutting through the dark. That's when we found it. A makeshift bed, blankets, a pillow, a few empty water bottles, food wrappers scattered nearby. Someone had been living there. The air was ice cold, still carrying the faint scent of cigarettes. Then I saw it. A metal vent cut into the floor, wide enough for someone to crawl through. It led straight down to my bedroom closet. Mr. Reeves cursed under his breath. "I'll call the sheriff," he said. I nodded, but my eyes were fixed on that vent. The metal was still warm. I didn't wait. I grabbed my keys, Jasper under one arm, and ran. I didn't even stop to pack. By the time I hit the gravel road, Mr. Reeves was already on the phone with the police. They searched the property for hours. When they finally came back down from the attic, the sheriff's face was pale. "The bedding's still warm," he said quietly. "Whoever it was, they were here when you went up." I moved out that night. A week later, I drove back with Mr. Reeves to pick up a few things. The house looked smaller in daylight, almost harmless. But when we walked past the attic hatch, I noticed the pull string was gone, cut clean off. I didn't go inside again. Sometimes the scariest stories aren't about ghosts at all. They're about people. We tell ourselves houses creak and shadows lie. But real danger doesn't always hide in the dark. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, just above your head. Always trust what feels wrong, because sometimes the house is watching. They say nothing good happens after midnight, especially on the back roads of Wisconsin. I used to laugh at that, until that November night when I found out how true it could be. The weekend had started simply enough. My parents lived out near Eau Claire, and I hadn't been home since late summer. Mom had made her usual overcooked roast beef, and Dad had fallen asleep in front of the TV before dessert. It was comforting in a way, like stepping back into a quieter, slower version of my life. When I left that Sunday night, the air already smelled like snow. I could have stayed till morning, but I wanted to get back to my apartment before work. The drive was 3 hours, mostly through empty farmland and 2-lane highways that cut through patches of forest. I'd done it 100 times before. For the first hour, everything was fine. Classic rock humming from the radio, a thermos of gas station coffee in the cup holder, the rhythmic flash of mile markers passing by. Then the fog started. At first, just a thin mist rising off the fields, then thicker, heavier, until it began swallowing the headlights whole. The radio started crackling like I was driving through static. The GPS on my phone flickered once, twice, then froze. I slowed down to 30, leaning forward over the wheel, my eyes straining to make out the white lines on the pavement. I couldn't shake the feeling that the world had gone smaller, like the fog wasn't just weather but a wall closing in. That's when I saw her. A woman standing on the shoulder of the road, waving one arm above her head. She was next to a dark sedan with its hood up, hazard lights blinking weakly through the fog. I hesitated. It was late. The highway was empty. Every instinct told me to keep driving. But my dad had raised me to help people who were stranded. Small-town decency drilled into me since I was old enough to drive. I slowed down and pulled over a few yards ahead of her. As soon as I stopped, the radio cut out completely. When I stepped out, the cold hit like a slap. My breath came out in short, white clouds. The woman was maybe in her 30s, pale, with long hair that looked almost silver in the fog. She wore a light jacket, way too thin for the cold. "Ma'am?" I called out, trying to sound calm. "You okay? Car trouble?" She turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "Thank God," she said. Her voice was steady, not panicked, not relieved, just even. "I've been here for hours. No one's come by." I glanced around. The road behind us was empty, vanishing into the fog like it had been erased. "What happened?" I asked. "Engine died," she said. "It just stopped. I don't have service." "I can call someone for you," I offered, reaching for my phone. That's when she said it, softly, almost like she was talking to herself. "He doesn't like that." I froze. "Sorry, who doesn't?" She didn't answer. Her eyes flicked past me, over my shoulder, like she was watching something move behind me. I turned, scanning the fog. Nothing. Just the faint hiss of wind and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. When I turned back, she was smiling faintly. A small, polite smile like she knew something I didn't. "Your car's still running," she said. "You should keep it that way." Something about her calmness made my stomach twist. I wanted to leave, but politeness, or stupidity, kept me standing there. Then I noticed the ground near her car. Footprints, 2 sets, one leading from the driver's door to where she stood, the other circling around my car. Did someone else stop before me? I asked carefully. Her smile didn't fade. He's still here. And then, from somewhere in the fog behind me, I heard a sound. The metallic click of my trunk latch. Every muscle in my body locked up. I spun around, knife-edge adrenaline surging through me. The fog was so thick now I couldn't see more than 10 feet. My headlights carved out 2 narrow cones of pale yellow, but they hit nothing. No movement, no shapes. Then came another sound, a low scrape, like boots on gravel. I didn't think. I ran. I dove back into the driver's seat, slammed the door shut, and hit the locks. My fingers shook so hard I nearly dropped the keys. The woman hadn't moved. She was still standing by her stalled car, one hand resting lightly on the hood, just watching me. I yelled through the closed window, "I'm calling the cops!" But even as I said it, I knew I wouldn't, not until I was miles away. I jammed the car into drive and floored it. The tires spat gravel as I tore away, the fog swallowing the red blink of her hazards behind me. For a few seconds, all I could hear was my own ragged breathing and the hum of the engine. The fog pressed against the windshield like it was trying to get in. Then from the back seat something shifted. A soft, slow movement. Fabric against fabric. My heart stopped. I looked up at the rearview mirror. Nothing. Just the dim outline of the back seat, empty. I told myself it was my jacket, sliding off the seat. That was all. I didn't stop. I didn't look back again. It wasn't until I reached the gas station on the edge of town that I finally exhaled. When I got out to pump gas, I checked the trunk. Empty. Locked tight. Maybe I'd imagined it all. The fog, the woman, the footprints. Maybe the cold and exhaustion had gotten to me. I wanted to believe that, but I couldn't explain what I saw when I got back into the car. The passenger seatbelt. It was buckled. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound outside my apartment, a passing car, the wind through the gutters, made my pulse spike. I left the lights on, phone charging beside me. By morning, I almost convinced myself I was fine. I went to work, drank too much coffee, tried to laugh it off when my coworker asked why I looked like I hadn't slept. But that night, when I drove home, the fog was back, thick again. Same stretch of road, same pale glow in the headlights. Halfway home, the radio started crackling, the same static, and through it, faintly, a woman's voice. "Pull over." I turned the volume down, hard. It was impossible. There was no signal that far out. No station came in clear. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel. Then I saw the reflection. Not in the mirror, in the glass of the windshield where the fog condensed in beads of moisture. A faint outline of a face behind mine. A woman's face. She was sitting in the back seat, smiling. I slammed the brakes and spun around. Nothing. The seat was empty. But the window glass behind me still held the shape of her. A fogged imprint, a faint trace of where her head had been. I drove the rest of the way home, shaking so badly I could barely keep the car on the road. I went to the police the next morning. The officer behind the desk listened politely, but didn't write anything down. "Sounds like you were tired," he said. "We've had fog accidents all week. You probably stopped for someone who wasn't really there." "But the footprints, animals," he said quickly. "Fog messes with perspective." I left feeling like a lunatic. That night, I couldn't stop replaying her words. He doesn't like that. Who was he? I didn't have an answer, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd brought something with me that night. 2 days later, my neighbor knocked on my door. "Hey man," he said, "you left your trunk open." My blood turned to ice. I walked out to the parking lot. The trunk was open, not wide, just cracked. Inside was nothing but my emergency blanket and a faint, sour smell, like damp leaves. When I closed it, I caught my reflection in the glass, and for a split second, I saw another shape standing just behind me. Tall, male, and in the reflection, he was smiling too. The next morning, I traded the car in, told the dealer I didn't care about the price. I walked away without looking back once. But sometimes, when the weather turns cold and fog rolls across the fields, I still hear a knock echo in the distance, 3 times, deliberate, and I remember the woman's calm, steady voice. He doesn't like that. Some warnings aren't meant to be ignored. Compassion is noble, but blind trust can be deadly. On empty roads and in lonely places, not every cry for help is what it seems, and not every passenger you pick up is alive. I'd always liked long drives at night. There was something calming about the hum of the tires on the asphalt, the way the world seemed to narrow into that tunnel of headlights. But that night in November, the road felt different, emptier, colder. The radio crackled in and out and my phone battery was dying. I'd been driving from Chicago to Denver trying to clear my head after a breakup that had left me raw and restless. It wasn't a spontaneous trip exactly. I'd planned the route, the stops, even the playlists, but plans have a way of falling apart when the universe wants to test you. It started with a sputter. Then the dashboard lights flickered and the engine coughed once, twice, and died. I coasted to the shoulder, cursed softly, and tried the ignition again. Nothing. Just the faint hiss of the wind pushing through the trees. I popped the hood even though I knew nothing about engines. The air smelled metallic and damp like rain that never came. Steam rose from somewhere deep inside. My breath turned white in the cold. Perfect, I muttered. The highway was silent. No passing cars, no glow of civilization in any direction. Just fog thick enough to blur the stars. I checked my phone. 2% battery, no signal. That's when I saw the faint red glow through the fog, a neon sign, flickering weakly like a dying firefly. I could barely make out the word. Motel. I grabbed my bag from the trunk and started walking. The crunch of gravel under my boots was the only sound. The place came into focus slowly. A squat building with peeling paint, 8 doors lined in a row, and a sign that read, Sunset Lodge. The irony wasn't lost on me. Inside the office, the air was stale, smelling faintly of dust and cigarettes. A man sat behind the counter, flipping through an old magazine. He looked up when the door creaked open. "Car trouble?" he asked. His voice was thin, wary. "Yeah," I said. "It died about a mile back. You got a phone I can use? I need a tow." He hesitated before nodding toward a dusty landline on the wall. "Line's been acting up," he said. "Storm last week messed with it. You can try, though." I picked up the receiver. Dead silence. "Figures." He rubbed his neck, eyes flicking toward the hallway behind him. "You can stay the night if you want. Room 6 is clean. I'll call the garage for you in the morning." Something in his tone made me pause. Not kindness, nervousness, like he was waiting for something. "How much?" I asked. 40, he said quickly, sliding a key across the counter. "Cash only." As I counted the bills, I noticed his hands trembling slightly. "You okay?" I asked. He forced a smile. "Yeah, just a long night." When I turned to go, he added quietly, "Keep your door locked. Some folks passing through lately been strange." I nodded, thinking he meant drifters or addicts. But the way his eyes darted back to the hallway again, like he expected something to come out of it, stuck with me long after I shut my door for the night. Room 6 was small and smelled faintly of mildew. The bedspread had cigarette burns, the heater rattled like an angry ghost, and the lamp flickered every few seconds. But after that walk in the cold, I didn't care. I tossed my bag on the chair and tried the TV. Static. No cable, no signal, just the soft hiss of nothing. I sat on the bed, scrolling my phone even though it was nearly dead. 1%. No service. I gave up and let the dark settle in. That's when I heard it. 3 slow knocks. On the door next to mine, then silence. I waited, thinking maybe another guest had arrived, but there were no car sounds, no footsteps, nothing. A few minutes later, more knocks, this time farther down the hall. And then, footsteps. Slow, uneven, dragging slightly. They stopped right outside my door. "Hello?" I called, instantly regretting it. No answer. Just that faint shuffle again, like someone turning away. I peeked through the peephole, but the hallway was empty. Only the flickering light above casting sickly yellow shadows. I sat back down, heart pounding. Maybe the clerk was checking on rooms, maybe just an old building settling in the cold. Then came the knocking again, soft, insistent. On my door this time. "Clerk?" I asked, standing. "Everything okay?" The knocking stopped. I pressed my ear to the wood. Silence. When I looked through the peephole again, the light had stopped flickering. The hallway was pitch black. I didn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I heard the heater click off, followed by footsteps again. Faster this time. Urgent. Running. A door slammed somewhere down the hall. Then, a few seconds later, another sound. The phone in my room rang. I jumped. I stared at it for a long time before picking up. "Hello?" Nothing. Just faint breathing. "Who is this?" Click. Line dead. That was it. I grabbed my jacket and decided to find the clerk. Maybe he'd seen someone messing around. Maybe he was the one calling. The hallway lights flickered to life when I opened the door. The air felt colder, heavier. My boots left clear prints on the thin layer of dust coating the floor. Halfway to the front desk, I noticed something strange. Muddy footprints. They started at my door and went all the way down the hall. I followed them with my stomach twisting tighter each step. The prints stopped at the front desk. The clerk's chair was empty. The magazine he'd been reading still lay open. "Hello?" I called. Nothing. The front door creaked open slightly, wind pushing against it. The neon sign outside buzzed faintly. When I turned back, the phone behind the counter rang once, then went silent. The footprints were still wet. I searched behind the desk. The register drawer was open, cash still inside. A half-empty coffee cup sat on the counter, still warm. Something about that made it worse. He'd been there minutes ago. I spotted a small TV screen built into the wall, a security monitor showing grainy footage from the hallway. One camera feed blinked. Room 6. My room. The screen showed the door slightly ajar. I froze. I hadn't left it open. As I stared, a figure moved past the camera, just a blur of shadow, tall and hunched. Then the feed cut out. I stepped back, knocking the chair over. My breath came in short, shallow bursts. "Okay," I muttered, trying to think. "Someone's here. I'm leaving." I headed for the door, but something stopped me. A faint sound from behind the counter, like whispering. I followed it to a small office door, half open. Inside was a cluttered desk, papers everywhere, and a recorder blinking red. I hit play, static. Then a voice. "If you're hearing this, don't stay. The rooms, they repeat. The people, don't leave." I stopped the tape, heart pounding. A fresh knock echoed from somewhere down the hall. This time I didn't wait to find out who it was. I ran outside, fog clinging to everything like breath on glass. My car sat where I'd left it, but something about it looked wrong. Dustier, older. I yanked the door open and turned the key. Nothing. The engine was cold, lifeless. I looked back toward the motel. The Sunset Lodge sign flickered once, twice, then went dark. The world fell silent. I started walking. The highway stretched empty in both directions. The sky lightened slowly, pale gray swallowing the fog. My legs ached, my lungs burned, but I didn't stop. After what felt like hours, I finally saw headlights. A truck slowed beside me, window rolling down. "You okay, buddy?" the driver asked. "Car died," I managed. "Back at the motel." He frowned. "What motel?" "Sunset Lodge," I said, pointing back the way I'd come. He shook his head. "Ain't been a motel out here in years. Burned down sometime in the 90s. I turned to look. Through the thinning fog, there was nothing. No sign, no building, just an empty lot overgrown with weeds. My car wasn't there. Sometimes the road offers you shelter, and sometimes it offers a warning. When you feel something's off, trust it. Safety doesn't always come with four walls and a roof. Fear exists to keep us alive, and the worst mistake we make is convincing ourselves we're imagining it. I bought the house on Willow Creek Road because it was cheap, and because at 34 I was tired of renting apartments with thin walls and loud neighbors. It wasn't much, a 2-story Craftsman built in the late 60s, with a wraparound porch and an overgrown backyard that sloped down toward the creek. The real estate agent had called it a fixer-upper with good bones. What she didn't say was that those bones creaked every time the wind changed direction. I moved in the week before Halloween, hauling boxes up the stairs and telling myself that the noises, pipes groaning, wood shifting, were just a house getting used to being lived in again. It had sat empty for almost 3 years after the previous owner, a man named Harold Kincaid, passed away. The neighbors told me he'd been something of a recluse, retired from the power company, lived there alone since his wife died. I didn't think much of it. A lot of people die alone. I unpacked my life, hung up curtains, and tried to make the place feel like mine. By November, the house had settled. Or maybe I had. My job at the auto shop was steady, and my nights were mostly quiet. Sometimes too quiet. When the rain came, it came hard, hammering on the roof and running in sheets down the windows. I'd sit on the couch with a beer, the TV throwing its blue light across the living room. That night was one of those nights, rain, wind, and the steady drone of the news in the background. The power flickered around 11. Just a quick blink, then back on. I didn't think much of it. But when it went out completely just after midnight, the silence hit hard. The hum of the refrigerator stopped. The TV went black. Outside, thunder rolled so close it shook the floorboards. I grabbed my phone for light and decided to find the candles I'd packed somewhere upstairs. Halfway up the stairs, I heard something, a faint crackling sound like static. I stopped. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the guest bedroom. The guest bedroom was the only room I hadn't really touched since moving in. Boxes lined one wall and an old CRT television sat in the corner, covered in a thin layer of dust. I'd brought it with me from my last apartment but never plugged it in. The thing must have been 20 years old. I hadn't thought about it in weeks, but now, as I stood in the doorway, I saw that it was on. The screen glowed faint gray, the kind of weak light that hums more than it shines. Static whispered through the room. I remember thinking, that's impossible. The power had been out for 20 minutes. I stepped closer, my phone's light shaking slightly in my hand. I could see my reflection in the dusty glass. Pale, wide-eyed, the beam from my phone like a spotlight on my face. Then, just behind my reflection, something moved. A dark shape, standing in the hallway behind me. I spun around so fast the phone almost slipped from my hand. Nothing. Just the empty hall and the soft patter of rain against the roof. When I turned back, the static had gotten louder. The gray fuzz seemed to breathe, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. And then the words started to form. Letters flickered in and out, struggling to stay visible through the snow of the screen. Turn around. That was enough for me. I bolted downstairs, every step echoing in the dark. I sat by the front door for what felt like an hour, phone clutched in my hand like a weapon, waiting for the power to return. When the lights finally came back, I went upstairs again. The room was dark. The television was off. It was also unplugged, the cord still neatly coiled around the base. The next day, I walked to the fence line where my neighbor, Walt, was raking leaves. Walt was in his late 60s, retired Navy, and the kind of man who noticed everything that happened on the block. "Morning," I called. He nodded. "Rough night. Storm knocked out half the grid." "Yeah," I said. "Hey, did you ever know the guy who lived in my place before me, Kincaid?" Walt leaned on his rake. "Harold? Yeah. Quiet guy. Worked at the substation down by the river. Spent most of his time in that house tinkering with old TVs and radios. Heard he had a whole room full of them." "Radios?" I asked. "Ham radios, scanners, weird old electronics. The kind of stuff that talks back if you let it." He chuckled, but there was something uneasy in his tone. "Why? Something acting up?" I hesitated. "The old TV in the guest room turned on last night. Power was out." He frowned. "That thing plugged in?" "No." Walt's eyes narrowed, and he nodded once like he'd decided something. "You might want to get rid of it." Harold had a way of hanging on to his hobbies. That night, I unplugged the television again, just in case, and draped a blanket over it. But around 2 a.m., I woke to the faint crackle of static through the walls. I tried to ignore it at first. Told myself it was just the wind or my imagination. But the next night, it came back, soft, rhythmic, like someone whispering through a speaker turned too low. I followed the sound to the guest room. The blanket I'd thrown over the TV was on the floor. The screen glowed faintly, though the plug still hung loose from the wall. This time, I didn't run. I just stood there and said, "What do you want?" The static changed pitch, climbing higher. For a second, I thought I heard words in it, buried deep under the hiss. "Help. Turn. Off." My throat went dry. "Turn what off?" The screen flashed white. A shape appeared for half a second. A face maybe, or the memory of one. Then the screen went black. The next morning I drove down to the substation by the river. The building was locked up, rust on the chain-link fence. Through the gaps I saw a faded warning sign, "High voltage, do not enter." And below it, scrawled in marker, "Kincaid lives here." When I got home, the TV was gone. Not moved, gone. Dust outlined the square where it had been, but the machine itself had vanished. For a while I thought about moving. But moving doesn't fix what follows you. Weeks passed, and the storms came heavier that winter. The power went out 3 more times, and each time, I swore I could hear that faint hiss of static just beyond the edge of silence. Sometimes I still see the glow of a screen in that guest room when I pass by at night. Faint, gray, like a memory refusing to fade. Last week, I finally went through Harold Kincaid's old boxes in the attic. Inside one, I found stacks of VHS tapes labeled with dates, none of them newer than 2004. Most were blank, but one had writing in shaky blue ink. "Turn around." I haven't watched it. Some things are better left unseen. Sometimes the past doesn't haunt houses. It haunts the people who step into them. Curiosity and denial can blind us to danger hiding in plain sight. The things we leave unfinished, grief, guilt, obsession, don't fade just because the lights go out. In the end, what truly haunts us isn't the noise and the static. It's the silence that follows when we refuse to listen. I've always been a creature of habit. Maybe it came from years of working double shifts at the plant, or maybe it was the comfort of knowing what to expect every day. Either way, my weeknights followed the same pattern. Clock out at 8:45 p.m., grab my duffel bag, drive the same cracked back road out of town, and stop at Valley Market, the little grocery store sitting half a mile from the county line. The store had been there as long as I could remember. Small brick building, dull yellow lights, and a parking lot with potholes big enough to swallow a tire. It was quiet, never crowded, and that was the point. The big chain stores in town were always packed with families and screaming kids. Valley Market was the opposite. No music, no announcements. Just the low hum of the freezers and the occasional squeak of an old cartwheel. I didn't even need a list anymore. I bought the same things. A 6-pack, a microwave dinner, maybe some fruit to make myself feel healthy. The cashier, a young woman with auburn hair and a polite smile, always rang me up with the same words. "Find everything okay tonight?" I'd nod, swipe my card, and be gone in under 5 minutes. It was routine, predictable, safe, until the night it wasn't. That Thursday started normal enough, cold November air biting through my jacket as I left work. I remember the faint smell of metal and oil still clinging to my hands when I got into my truck. The sky was a dull gray, the kind that made the world feel smaller. When I pulled into the Valley Market lot, there were only 2 cars, mine and an old station wagon I didn't recognize. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering once before steadying. Inside it was just like always, except for one thing. The cashier wasn't the same. Or maybe she was. Same height, same voice, same smile, but her face looked off, slightly different. Maybe older? The shape of her jaw sharper, eyes a little darker. "Find everything okay tonight?" she asked, scanning my items. I stared for a second too long, confused. Yeah, same as always." She smiled wider, showing teeth too perfect to fit her face. "Good." When she handed me my receipt, her fingers were ice cold. Outside, I brushed it off as exhaustion. But when I glanced back through the glass doors, she was still watching me, smile frozen, head tilted just slightly like a mannequin waiting to move. The next night, I went back, because that's what you do when your life runs on autopilot. You stick to the script. But the store felt smaller. The second I stepped inside, I noticed it. The aisles were closer together, the ceiling lower. It wasn't obvious at first. It just felt wrong, like the proportions were off. "Evening," said the cashier. I froze again. It was her voice, but a different face. Same hair color, same uniform, but the shape of her eyes and smile had changed. "Long day?" she asked, scanning my beer. "Yeah," I muttered, forcing a laugh. "You new here?" She paused mid-scan. "I've always been here." I looked around. Only one other customer, a man in a brown coat, stood in the bread aisle. He didn't move, just stared at the shelves like he'd forgotten what bread was. Something in my gut told me to leave. Instead, I wandered toward the freezer section. The hum of the compressors was louder than usual, vibrating in my chest. Each aisle looked longer than the last, stretching out in a way that made no architectural sense. When I turned down aisle 4, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. It looped back into itself. No matter how far I walked, I kept ending up by the same display of canned soup, the same dented cans, the same half-torn sign that said 2 for $5. I tried another aisle, same result. When I turned back toward the registers, the man in the brown coat was gone, but I could still hear footsteps. I wasn't dreaming. I told myself that over and over, trying to keep my mind anchored. Maybe the store had been remodeled or I'd gotten turned around. Maybe the fog outside was messing with my sense of direction. Still, my heart pounded as I turned another corner and nearly dropped my basket. Standing by the freezer doors was me. Or someone who looked exactly like me. Same jacket, same boots, even the same tired look in his eyes. He was pushing a cart. When he saw me, he froze too, head tilting like he was seeing his reflection move on its own. "Hey," I said, voice shaking. He didn't answer. He just turned his cart slowly and walked away, the wheels squeaking in that same rhythmic pattern mine always made. I followed, rounding the corner, and found nothing. Just another stretch of aisle 4 looping endlessly. I dropped the basket and ran. Every aisle looked identical. The freezers hummed louder and louder until the sound turned into a low, vibrating roar. The fluorescent lights flickered faster, strobing white and yellow. When I reached the registers, the cashier, whichever version she was, stood perfectly still, eyes blank, hands resting on the counter. "Find everything okay tonight?" she asked again. Her voice echoed unnaturally, like it came from all directions at once. I didn't answer. I bolted for the door, Only, there was no door. Where the glass entrance had been was now a wall of stacked boxes labeled clearance. Panic makes time elastic. I don't know how long I ran through that place. Minutes. Hours. Every turn led me back to the same aisles, the same displays. The air grew colder, my breath coming out in clouds. Somewhere near the produce section I saw motion, someone darting past the end of the aisle. Another me. "Hey!" I shouted, voice cracking. He didn't look back. The store lights dimmed until only the freezer doors glowed. Inside each one I thought I saw movement. Not reflections, figures. People standing motionless among the frosted glass, faces half obscured, eyes wide open. That was when I saw the unmarked door at the end of the hall. I didn't remember it being there before. No exit sign, no handle, just a metal plate with scratches around the edge. I didn't think. I kicked it open. A blast of cold air hit me, and suddenly I was outside, stumbling into the empty parking lot. The night was dead silent. I turned around, expecting to see the store's glowing windows, but the lights were off. The entire building was dark, abandoned, and the sign above the entrance, barely visible in the fog, read, "Valley Market, closed since 1998. I stared, unable to process it. My truck sat alone under the flickering streetlight, coated in frost. When I finally climbed in and started the engine, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. As I pulled out of the lot, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. Through the fogged glass inside the store, I thought I saw the lights flicker back on, just for a second. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe it? The next morning I drove past the same spot in daylight. The lot was cracked and overgrown with weeds. The building was boarded up, graffiti scrawled across the doors. A faded for sale sign leaned crooked in the dirt. When I checked online, there were a few old articles. Fire in 1998, cause unknown, 2 employees unaccounted for. No mention of anyone rebuilding. I tried to let it go. But for weeks after, little things kept happening. At the gas station, the hum of the refrigerator would spike in pitch, and for a heartbeat I'd swear I could hear that same freezer sound. Once I saw someone at the edge of the parking lot, looked just like me, staring. When I blinked, he was gone. And sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I hear a voice just behind my ear, calm and polite. "Find everything okay tonight?" I moved 2 towns over after that, changed my route home, stopped going to any grocery store after dark. But every November, when the air turns cold and the world feels smaller, I dream I'm walking those aisles again, turning corners that lead nowhere, surrounded by the soft hum of the freezers. And somewhere, just ahead of me, I can see my other self still pushing a cart, still trying to find the way out. Routine can be comforting, but it can also be a trap. When life becomes too predictable, we stop noticing the small shifts, the quiet wrongness creeping in at the edges. Sometimes the familiar can become the strangest thing of all. People always say hospitals never sleep, but that's not true. They do in their own eerie way. Around 1 a.m., the fluorescent lights hum a little softer, the hallways stretch longer, and the air grows heavy with the kind of quiet that feels alive. That's the part of the night I hated most, when everything slowed down after the rush. The code blues stopped, the intercom fell silent, and it was just me, a janitor mopping the corridor, and the endless beeping of heart monitors. I'd been working nights at St. Mary's Medical Center for 3 years. It wasn't glamorous. Vitals, meds, paperwork. But it paid the rent. My apartment was on the other side of town, which meant relying on the late bus that ran every hour, until apparently that night. By the time I clocked out, the parking lot was half swallowed by fog. The cold cut through my scrubs, and my breath came out in pale clouds. I checked my watch. 12:47 a.m. The last bus usually came around 12:50, but when I got to the stop on Maple Street, it was already gone. The shelter's fluorescent light flickered weakly, painting everything in a sickly yellow glow. I stood under it, rubbing my hands together, listening to the wind drag across the pavement. That's when I heard footsteps. A woman appeared out of the fog, walking toward me. She wore the same hospital-issued coat I did, stethoscope around her neck, a weary smile on her face. "Rough shift?" she asked. Her voice was soft, steady, like someone who'd been up for 20 hours but was too kind to complain about it. "Yeah," I said. "Double. You too?" She nodded, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Pediatrics. Been a long week." I smiled, relieved for the company. "Haven't seen you around. New hire?" "Sort of," she said with a faint laugh. "Just filling in for a while. My name's Claire." Her ID badge glinted under the flickering light. Claire Morris, RN, St. Mary's Medical Center. We talked about the usual things: burnout, cafeteria food, how the vending machines only ate your money when you really needed coffee. She was easy to talk to, with this calmness about her that made the fog seem less heavy. Then the bus came. It was old, older than any city bus I'd seen. Paint peeling, headlights dim. There was no route number on the sign above the windshield, just a faint glow. "Guess that's mine," she said, smiling. I glanced at the driver, but the window was too fogged to see inside. "See you tomorrow, Nathan," she said as she stepped up. I blinked. "Wait, how'd you know my name?" She only smiled again and waved as the bus doors shut. The bus pulled away without headlights, swallowed whole by the fog. I stood there long after it was gone, until the street went completely silent. The next morning, the hospital cafeteria smelled like burnt toast and cheap coffee. I sat across from Mike, one of the security guards, trying to explain what had happened. "You're telling me you met a nurse last night," he said, stirring his coffee, "who got on a ghost bus." "I'm telling you," I said. "She works here. Or she said she did. Claire Morris." He frowned. "Never heard of her." "Check the staff directory." He sighed, pulled out his tablet, and typed for a moment. Then his eyebrows furrowed. "There's no Claire Morris listed. No temp contracts either." I stared at him. "You sure? Positive?" He leaned back, smirking. "You sure you didn't dream this up, man? You've been pulling doubles all week. People see weird stuff when they're fried." "I wasn't dreaming," I said quietly. "She knew my name." Mike shrugged. "Maybe someone mentioned you." I didn't answer. The rest of the day dragged by in that slow-motion way night shifts do. Every time I passed another nurse, I half expected to see her face, but no one even vaguely resembled her. That night, I almost called for a ride, but I couldn't shake the need to see if she'd be there again. So I went back to the Maple Street stop. The fog rolled thicker that night, swallowing the streetlights until they looked like floating orbs in the dark. The same flickering bulb hummed overhead. I stood there, hands in my pockets, eyes scanning the mist. And then, faintly, through the glass of the bus shelter, I saw her, not standing beside me. In the reflection. She was behind me, smiling softly. When I turned around, there was no one there. By the next day, I was questioning my sanity. Sleep-deprived, maybe hallucinating. It wouldn't have been the first time a night nurse lost it for a bit, but something inside me wouldn't let it go. So, during lunch, I went to records. Marcy, the woman who ran the department, was one of those people who'd been at the hospital forever. She could tell you which patient had what room in 1998. "Marcy," I said carefully, "was there ever a nurse named Claire Morris here? Maybe a long time ago?" She adjusted her glasses. "That name sounds familiar. Why?" "Just curious," I said. "Thought I met her." Marcy frowned, scrolling through the old employee lists on her desktop. "Well, I'll be damned," she murmured. "There was a Claire Morris, hired in 1982, pediatrics." My pulse quickened. "That's her." Marcy clicked again, her face darkening. "But Nathan, she died. Car accident on Maple Street, 1984. I just stared at her. "You sure?" She nodded. "Hit by a city bus," they said, late at night after her shift. I left the room without another word. That night, I swore I wouldn't go back. But when my shift ended, my feet carried me there anyway. The fog was thicker than ever, the air colder. My breath came out in white bursts. At exactly 12:50, I heard the distant rumble of an engine. The old bus appeared again, same peeling paint, same dim glow. The doors hissed open, and there she was, Claire, smiling. "You waited?" she said softly. My voice caught. "Who are you?" She tilted her head. "Just someone who never made it home." Behind her, the bus seats were filled, faces pale, eyes vacant. "I shouldn't be here," I whispered. She nodded. "No, you shouldn't." And then she smiled one last time before the doors closed. The bus faded into the fog, its taillights vanishing like dying embers. The next morning, I didn't tell anyone. I just worked, quiet and distant. When I left that night, the fog had finally lifted. The streetlights were sharp, clear. At the bus stop, I glanced at the glass of the shelter. And there she was again. Not smiling this time, just watching. Behind her reflection faintly, I could see the outline of the bus waiting in the dark. I turned away, walking fast, my footsteps echoing down the empty street. I never took the Maple Street bus again. Sometimes, though, when I'm on late shift and glance at the window by the stairwell, I swear I see her reflection there too, waiting, always waiting for the bus that never reaches its last stop. Not every stranger is meant to be understood, and not every moment can be explained. Some stories live between the real and the imagined, echoes of lives cut short, replaying until someone remembers them. But most of all, the story of that night reminds me. Listen to your instincts. When the world feels wrong, it usually is.